Hi, my name is Rick Childress. This is the final assignment for Journalism 301. I think looking over the whole of the semester, my favorite textbook chapter by far, the most important one to me was Chapter 4, Fresh Perspective. I really liked at the beginning of the chapter how it kind of laid out, here's kind of some of the cliches for news coverage and how a lot of stories typically get covered in the same way over and over again, and how that can kind of get boring for the reader. I guess maybe not boring, but maybe less enticing to a prospective reader. And I think that's extremely important in today's news environment because, I mean, when you think about the internet, I think so often, at least locally, if there's something breaking in Lexington, I think you'll see 3 or 4 different news organizations post the same story within the same half hour. You know, I think there's that rush to be first. And I think when you're doing that, you're not literally thinking about how can I be different? How can I be, how can I give something that's different for the reader, something that's useful, that could go, might be able to make our story look a little bit more attractive. And I really liked how that chapter lays it out. It gives a lot of different, just kind of, it puts a label on, here's some ways that you can do that. And it's definitely something I'm going to refer back to, especially the Colonel, especially, I guess, in my future career, because, you want to stand out, and I think that's, in the online environment, that's extremely important. And I guess continuing in the online environment, social media, I think, has made reporting entirely different than it used to be. Like that same example of posting that within the half hour of each other, I think, there wouldn't be that rush to be first if we weren't so dependent on social media to get people to click on our content. And then there's competition with other news organizations to actually get those clicks, to get people to look at it when there is a big story. And I think that's really changed the way that, news stories have been laid out, how headlines are written, the fact that we had to write chatter for these Facebook posts, for these Twitter posts, and then there's also this kind of pack mentality of news organizations all chasing the same story. There's something happens in Lexington, the Herald Leader is going to post something, WKYT, LX18, sometimes the Colonel, depending on how it goes. And a lot of times those stories are all the same. I think that affects the news organization because, obviously that's going to affect the bottom line. The way that these organizations make money now is in some ways really dependent on Google, on, getting those search terms right, on getting, the best Facebook look, the best package with the photo, the chatter and the headline. I think that's kind of dangerous for the industry, personally, just because, we're entirely dependent on these other entities that aren't necessarily government. They're semi-government regulated, but, they make their own rules. And I think in some ways that can hurt the public perception of journalism because, I think especially locally, a lot of fake news does kind of develop on social media really quickly in group chats, on, Twitter comments. People can stir something up that isn't true, and a lot of people could believe it really quickly. And I think when you have a news organization that means well, they can come along and kind of call that out, talk to local authorities like, hey, this isn't true. And I think sometimes, people don't like that. They don't want to be told that, that dangerous myth that they've been believing is false. I think it's important to do that, but I think in calling out fake news is one of the duties of a newspaper, but publicly that's not always viewed well. And I think on top of that too, the way that these news organizations represent themselves on social media can really affect, I think a lot of news organizations have been trying to be more conversational, a lot more, I guess hip or with their audience. And I think sometimes that can be dangerous because we can really, I guess, leave the unbiased ideal in doing that. And I think for a student taking this class next semester, the reporting assignments are really probably the most challenging and also the most beneficial. There's a lot of, especially if you're not used to doing interviews, attending meetings, what have you, it's a great opportunity to get your feet wet and then I guess in an environment where it's not so high pressure. The interview reporting assignment in particular, it really makes you sit down, makes you think about your questions, makes you, use interviewing techniques and really go back through that interview and pick out what matters. And I think the public meeting assignment is also extremely important because, I think as students, we're really used to the classroom environment where